Trebon, they got the game. Customer success is their claim to fame. On the podcast, they light the spark, elevating your skills, creating a mark. Let's dive deeper into the playbook, the secrets they share. No need to look from onboarding to retention. They've got it all. Success is the goal.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Customer Success Playbook Podcast. I'm Trebon, and I'm here with my co-host, Kevin Metzger. As always, we'd really appreciate if you could rate, subscribe, and share the show with your network. Kevin, we got a great show today. I know you're big into AI and keeping me up to date on how it's evolving. It seems like every industry is being transformed, especially in the call center space. There's excitement about this in the call center space, but there's also some uncertainty around how AI is going to impact both the customer experience from the people calling in or contacting customer service and the operations of people handling those interactions. What do you think, Kev? What's your experience been like from a service perspective, and how AI has been changing your customer experience?
I think this is definitely your realm more than mine. The AI aspect of it's very interesting. As a customer, it's still not being deployed widely yet. True AI agents are really good at having an interactive conversation with you. And I think I've seen some tests. I've seen some development of agents that are good at having interactive conversations, but until it starts really getting into the real world, I think that's where we're not quite there yet. And I'm looking forward to hearing from Brian about how we're moving that in that direction, because I know he's been working on a few projects with that. I think that's going to be a real game changer once you can actually have a conversation and say, hey, I'm really looking for this information, and it can either answer or exit to a human effectively without making me say, I need to talk to an effing operator, get them on the phone.
Yeah. And that's why I'm excited to have this conversation, because Brian's actually doing it, Kev. And I love your perspective too, Kev, because I'm kind of in this world all the time. So like, as a consumer, are you feeling it? It sounds like maybe not yet, but I think you're going to learn lots today. I know I will as well. We're thrilled to have Brian Powers join us today. Brian has 25 years of experience in customer success, service, and experience, and he's CX certified. Kev, he's led global teams. Most recently, he served as Chief Experience Officer for a financial services company, overseeing operations in 10 countries. Brian has also implemented AI solutions for major names like American Airlines, Capital One, and United Airlines. Today, he's going to help us unpack AI's impact on call center operations and what it means for the customer experience. So we're going to dive into the possibilities and challenges AI presents for call centers, including what role it will play in automating customer interactions, how it's shifting the landscape of customer success, and what companies need to do to stay ahead of the curve. We're also going to explore specific use cases and get into some predictions for the future of AI in the space. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Good morning, both of you. I've been following the podcast. Hope everybody else clicks to follow and subscribe. It's a great learning experience, and it's a great journey to be on as we all progress together.
Yeah, and thanks for being here. Brian, AI is transforming call centers, but there's still a lot of speculation about whether it can really eventually replace them. In your view, is AI the death of the call center, or is this just another evolutionary step in contact center operations?
That's
a big question, Brian. Start with the big stuff early on, right? I'm going to ease into it, right?
Boom, is that the end of all the call centers and BPOs? Everybody's wondering. We had the same kind of step in the late 90s with e-commerce, and we thought that would be the death of the call centers. But really, it's an explosion of touch points, less and less tier 0, tier 1 type transactions needing human interaction. It's resulting in an upskilling of agents in the call center world. It's no longer seen as an entry-level job, somebody coming out of school. They really are expected to have a couple years of call center experience. So if tier 0, tier 1 are being automated, the tier 2, tier 3 require much more training, more guidance, and more agent guidance through AI tools so that they don't need as many supervisors. So it's a flattening of the organizations. The BPOs out there. The outsourced call centers are seeing their business erode through automation as opposed to butts and chairs and FTEs and hours. So it's an interesting paradigm. And it all goes back, as Kevin was saying, to customer adoption, right? Are customers ready to speak to a bot, or is it 0 pound, help, supervisor, escalate?
Brian, you said something that I want to dive into because I've had conversations with other leaders about skill sets. I think AI is going to be causing a lot of impact to the college education level person coming into the workforce, and they're going to be coming in and they're not real. AI soon will be good enough to be able to really manage a lot of those tier 1, tier 0 calls, things where the workforce was previously getting educated. As an executive in the industry, how do you see that changing how we basically hire workforce and bring workforce up to the level that they need to be at to really start serving the more complex questions and giving those kind of answers?
Thanks, Kevin. It's giving rise to a different focus of skills. You're right. That can be taught through academia or on-the-job training. But what I found from implementing AI is we didn't have the right team resources to implement from the go. So from the jump, we had to hire conversational engineers. Who knew what that title was just a few years ago? So people who can analyze the interactions from a business standpoint using tools like Power BI, Tableau, and actually reading the interactions, determining, okay, what's the best flow? What are the best outcomes so that we can design the IVA, right, through the voice system. This call may be recorded for quality purposes. Press 1 for sales. What options are customers choosing, and how can we get them to the right optimal touch point the fastest? Some of the WFM and IVA providers have those as professional services, but we don't always have that in-house. Is that a skill they can learn in academia and study in college, or is it they have to learn it based on the tools they get when they come out? A lot of API dips. If you're going to have a true conversational and not an, evolutionary, first was the FAQ bot, right? Just giving out basic information and spitting it back. Then conversational is what are we looking into the system for a more personalized experience? So Roman has a balance. We can route you directly over to collections. It saving you time, saving everybody time, and getting you not having to be transferred, which is a big impediment along the customer journey, a lot of friction. And then next comes generative AI. So how can we prevent this in the future? A big shift towards analytics, a big return on investment is visible, but very different resources, not only to launch, but then once it's born, you can't orphan it. This isn't launch and forget it. Otherwise, we'll have to mention Terminator a few times and Rise of the Machines, right? It becomes self-aware. So machine learning isn't there yet. Otherwise, we can just automate. It's going to get smarter like a chess machine and replace us all. But ML's not there. But we can tune these by monitoring why people are calling in. We want to make these call centers into an exception center. Well, why do they call? We don't want to get really good at handling transactions. We want to mine that. So the skill sets to understand why are they calling, what can be done to automate. And then CX is more than call center. CX is where did this question come from? Where's the expectation set that results in them calling later? And how do we improve that so they don't have to make the next call?
Brian, you touched on intelligent virtual agents, and I'm sure we'll probably talk about chatbots here at some point. I think when people talk about AI in the call center, they think of those customer-facing AI solutions. But there's a lot of solutions behind the scenes. The AI is helping the agents, which you as a customer don't even see. Here's an example is the call comes in, I'm talking to you, Kevin, and the transcript is running in real time. As I'm talking to you, it's popping me a guidance card, which is saying, hey, based off what Kevin's saying, make sure you sell him A, B, or C. Or to Brian, you talked about first call resolution. Make sure you ask this probing question to avoid that next call. Sometimes you have to read a disclosure script or a certain language around the call, and it can actually check to make sure you do that throughout, right? And so there's a lot of AI is helping kind of behind the scenes as me as an agent that, if I'm new on the phone or taking call after call after call, it's helping me guide all those interactions so again, I can make the next upsell. I can avoid the next call that comes into the call center, which I think is really exciting. So all that said, Brian, as a company that maybe is not using AI yet, they've heard about all of this. Maybe they've heard about the IVAs, the intelligent agents, the chatbots, some of the stuff I'm talking about. How did you go about starting to build the business case? Because I think this is a big challenge. You talked about resources, you talked about the ROI. How did you go about it, and what would you recommend to our listeners?
The agent guidance assist, I think, is the greatest opportunity here in the next step. If you look at how a call center is built, you've got a typical pyramid with QA on the outside. Now you can outsource or automate a lot of the QA. We used to look at 5 to 8 observations a month per agent. That is such a small sample when they're taking 30 to 40 calls a day. They could have had a bad day. If you miss one and you're getting unscored on 8, you're going to get an 87.5 and miss the spiff that happens at 90%, right? But if you can automate 90% plus through automation, they're getting better. They're getting more feedback, more timely, so they can make adjustments. And it's not in a formal sit down, listening to yourself with a supervisor. We have that pyramid shape. For every 10 agents, you have a lead. For every 2 leads, you have a supervisor. So if a customer service agent hits a point and they can't answer a customer's question or find data, they have to hit that mute button, put you on hold for a second, raise their hand, look for a supervisor or team lead to come help them. Well, like you were alluding to, imagine if that team lead supervisor is actually AI, listening to the conversation, hearing the sentiment and assessing the intent and giving suggested scripting guidance, or, hey, why don't you send this FAQ, send them this catalog. Maybe they need to get routed to the payment center, right? They're getting that assist instead of stopping the call and trying to get someone else involved. It's helping them get better because they're going to learn from those interactions ongoing. And then the next time it's more presumptive path to getting there. So you need an ROI. And if you're not doing some version of AI, you have to at least say you are, right? For the agent assist, Salesforce is rolling some things out now that are pretty spectacular and integrate, if we're allowed to mention vendors. But as far as getting there, so I look at what are the reasons for call, right? And then what are the biggest opportunities to automate? Transactions, payments, nearest locations, hours of operation. Head those off in the IVR or the chatbot. You build the business case by saying if a percent of those calls can be automated or handled through the bot, what's the payback versus the cost? It takes longer to implement. If you're doing agile or waterfall, typically it's more waterfall. Sorry, everybody wants to be agile and quick and have a sprint every 2 weeks, but there might not be enough to see after 2 weeks to be able to implement and test. So it might be a larger chunk, bigger rocks to move before you can see what's there. And there's a lot of executives who want to weigh in. One of the biggest conversations we had recently was, what's the voice and the personality of the bot? And everybody had an opinion. So we had to play samples and let them choose the different paths. And then once you implement, further investments needed. Tune the bot, right? Otherwise, you're going to turn customers off and they're going to go elsewhere. And make sure that this information's tight. So for cybersecurity reasons, it's not getting leaked.
So in the implementation process, what were some of the surprises you found while you were implementing through the project process?
A lot of the things that look like they already existed might actually be more of an alpha or a beta version. Not everything's ready for prime time. If you go to government websites, you don't see a lot of AI. They're not ready for it. They're worried for a misstep and it being publicized heavily. So everybody's excited. The ROI runs right through. Everybody wants to say to their investors, hey, we're doing AI and here's what we're doing. And to the customers, this is a CS focus, right? We want to talk about AI and we're implementing it here. It's going to improve your journey. We're AI first. If it's necessary, it takes longer than expected. More resources are needed and you need your top resources on this. It's very important. It's a big savings, but your best resources are already on other projects. So internally, from a CX perspective, you're lobbying for support, prioritization, resource commitment, and then, like I said, some of these are new resources we had to bring in. The vendors are willing to give you professional services, but that's on top of the SOW you just negotiated. You have to budget for What are all these conversational engineers, IVR mapping, customer journey? And then once you start to launch, how do we learn? And we say fail quickly. My boss would say, don't fail at all. You need to get the experiences out there, mine that data, and get better and sharpen that experience fast.
Brian, we touched on a lot of technologies. So I'll use an example. Like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when I saw speech analytics, I thought it was the greatest call center solution ever. I'm like, oh, this is a game changer. Speech is good. You can actually take a verbal conversation and transcribe the text. I thought this would take off. And it's been deployed and now it's becoming more commonplace, but it never had the kind of impact. People ask about AI and I say, this is the real game changer. And I feel like we're starting to scratch the surface. Where do you see this evolving in the contactor space? You've already talked about automating quality, which I'm glad you brought up, because nothing was worse than doing 4 evaluations per month per agent when you take 1,000 calls, right? And now you can automate, you can basically have a score on every call. But where do you see this going, either in the near future or maybe even aspirationally?
This takes me back to a now infamous white paper I wrote when I was a consultant at Accenture about the death of the call center. With e-commerce coming out, people aren't going to need to call ever again. And in my last role, I had 10 call centers across the globe. People are still using them. Now we have 855, 844, 866. We always thought it was just 1-800 number. So it's really expanding. But through AI, I think it's not just handling the transactions better, it's avoiding the transaction overall. I don't have to call Amazon ever. Because of intent-based, they're saying, here is your order confirmed, and here is the shipping number. And I think they're getting smarter. They're sending it when the device or whatever you've ordered has a tracking status. If I click tracking status and there's nothing there, I'm convinced they lost the order and it's never coming. So send it out, click it. If there's an exception, they tell you. If there's an opportunity to cancel, they give you that. So I think the biggest opportunity through AI is learning quickly why there's friction in your process. Why are they calling you at all? And these exception centers, mine the data, look at all of your omni-channel, all your bot, voice bot, chat bot, email, SMS conversations, online. Ask your account teams, what from your QBR, MBR, what are the clients asking about? Let's learn and get ahead of that, right? And then this Amazon service model, assess the intent, and get the information to them ahead of time. So learn faster and improve ongoing. Make these bots work well, but really super analyze. We've got so much more data now, like you're saying, through all the QA interactions, all the customer interactions. We're not sampling anymore. It's not a leading indicator. It's actually statistically significant data. We can sharpen the saw and improve the experience way early on, right? So are people calling because they thought they'd get a delivery in 2 days and it took 3? Well, are we not setting the expectations properly up front in marketing collateral on the website, person-to-person interactions, and get the feedback to the CS team so they can manage expectations better up front?
Yeah. Yeah. I think you nailed it, Brian. I just saw a thing on LinkedIn yesterday. They said, how do you want to contact your customer service, right? It was like phone, email, chatbot. It's like 70% still said phone. Right. And I know me, when I have a real, I love Amazon. I had a return. I didn't have to contact. I just got my form, got my barcode. It was great. But when we had an airline issue, I had a call. I like when they already know about what I'm calling about. Like, hey, Mr. Trebon, we see that you've done X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't even have to say it. It's that proactivity and the data dip and the API feeds that you talked about early on. You already know so much about me. Analytics probably knows me better than I know myself. So feed it up to me, make that conversation easy. If I do have to call, quick, to the point, get me to the right person, nail it, right? And I think that's what you're touching on.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And I think with Amazon, a very good example. What are some other industries or companies that are setting the standard for how AI should be implemented?
We all interact with banking, financial services, and retailers. It's a real margin killer. As soon as you have to make a phone call, they might have lost the margin on a product or service. And it's high volume. So working with some of the credit card providers and bankers, these low-level transactions, they're automating left and right. Like Bank of America, their Erica system has been out for many years. Another credit card provider, Synchrony, came out with their model in 2018. They're getting much more advanced, more adoption. When we had the cyber issue a month ago, and a lot of people were stranded, Some of the services like Delta were automating the outreach, offering alternatives so that you wouldn't have to call. The hold times were astronomical, over an hour. But the systems were offering alternatives for you, and you can still call or click to choose, get you into the mobile app where there's a lot more options and things they can do. Credits were automated because they didn't want to have to handle all those calls. They couldn't. It was just too much. So they relied quickly on IVR, messages on the website, powering up the bots and letting them make decisions.
Brian, it sounds like the call center is not going to die. Keep me honest. We're still going to have call centers in 5 years. You shouldn't wrap up shop yet.
Demographically, there's higher adoption at younger rates. I've got 3 in college. They would die before they call it toll free and have to interact with a person. They want self-service, according to the study you looked at. Yeah. But when necessary and for certain types of interactions, it's very personal. You can put a claim online through a mobile app, through USAA. I could easily do that. I called, even though I have a background in the industry. I want to hear from a person and ask them questions. When am I getting a rental car? Is this going to be covered? Do we have a potential for a lawsuit? Is there some indemnification? I want to run through that with a person. Someday I'll be more accustomed and rely more transactions to be automated, but sometimes we still want that personal touch.
Have we ready to give them the hard questions, or do you have anything else on the call center industry before we pivot?
I'm ready to go to the hard questions, but before the pivot, I will ask kind of a more broad question. So AI in general, Brian, any thoughts on what you're seeing come out or where it's going?
Mm-hmm. It's so many industry are diving into this, so many small startups. It's not just the big shops. I advise my peers to take the demos, make sure that you give them just 15, 20 minutes, ask to click on the secret doors just to make sure it's not vaporware or maybe it's in production. It looks good. Whenever you're getting pitched something and you're already using somebody else, you're using today's version, but what you're getting pitched is probably in the future. Try out applications. And then when you negotiate, set the SLA and the SOW, right? Make sure that you're going to hold them accountable, the cost plus and the death by 1,000 cuts with, we've got professional services. We can add more hours. No. We want them to tie to an ROI and you're going to have this done in 6 months. We don't want to wait due to their timeline. I see a lot more of this. I think the big trouble will be, I don't think we've seen a big cyber issue yet within AI. That's going to be coming next, right? PII, PCI, HIPAA, that data is exposed and we'll see if that gets taken advantage of. And then the bigger opportunity also is outbound, not the election-based calling. There's AI to qualify a lead before you put a person on the phone call. And these technologies are really getting good. So as far as the large volumes of outbound calls, and again, back to TCPA, making sure you're not violating people's do not contact wishes. But if you can do this faster and easier, then it's going to be a lot cheaper. So again, the tier 0, tier 1s are at risk.
All right, we're going to get into the rapid fire questions, Brian. Buckle up. We'll start with this. Are you an early bird or a night owl?
Early bird, definitely. You got to get started early, which means you can't be a night owl.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't be both. I've never heard anyone say both.
Burning both ends is rough. Tried it for a few years. It doesn't work. Do you enjoy cooking?
I like my wife's cooking. We got a Blackstone and we're trying new recipes. It's fun making things outside and doing it together is a lot of fun.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Blackstone. I got one back in 2020. My kids call it Cooven's Whittle.
All right, Brian, you live in Atlanta.
Yep.
So if someone's coming to visit us here, what's the one place they have to see and eat? You have a restaurant recommendation, a place they have to visit?
Oh, yeah. So first to eat comes to mind is the Varsity, right? World's largest fast food center. It's also a great testimony to customer experience. You walk in, you know right where to go. The boards are up high. You're greeted right away. They have your food ready and it's hot and fresh. They've pre-made most of it, but they know how much volumes to make based on the time of day and the day of the week. So it's a great customer experience. Place to go, I'd say the aquarium, seeing the whales and the penguin exhibit. It's a great experience. It's right next to the African American Museum of History and the World of Coca-Cola. Coke is not the same in every country, right? So you can try all the different samples and get your caffeine fix.
And don't forget the NCAA College Football Hall of Fame down there,
Directly
too.
across the street and next to Stats, right? You can buy
That's
your
right.
beer and pump it yourself.
That's right.
So, any books that you would recommend? Books, movies, TV shows. We'll take it.
Oh God, what is the iRobot, right? So, and this is 10 years ago, Malik, the actor. It was all about cyber, and it really prepares us for what's coming. Or the most recent one, also about cyber, about how the world ends, and how everything starts with the GPS and the satellites going down. So my son's in the Space Force. They're in charge of GPS and the national satellites. But I'll tell you, that'll be the first thing to go in case of any event. So those are kind of doomsday things. Otherwise, look forward to the political theater being done and getting rid of those shows. But yeah, iRobot's cool, man. It's all about cyber and knowing people, and everything you have is out there on the cloud. And so I've changed all my passwords and dropped TikTok as a result.
Wow. And please keep GPS. Tell your son to keep GPS safe. I can't get anywhere anymore without Waze. If my Waze goes down, I'm done. I can't leave the house until it's back up.
Agreed.
Brian, thanks for joining the show. Where can our audience find more about you?
LinkedIn. I'm Brian Powers, Atlanta. I'm sure there'll be a link within the podcast just to click. Just like Kevin and Roman, I'll paste interesting articles and thoughts and do polls and surveys over LinkedIn. I'm a big believer in networking, so a lot of the CX events around Atlanta, CS events. Roman's a big pickleballer and gets the folks out there. Just a different, pickleball, beer, and then let's talk about what challenges you have at work. So that's a neat way to join those associations and follow.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thanks so much for joining us. I really enjoyed the conversation. And our audience, I hope you enjoyed Brian's insights on AI's impact on the contact center. And make sure you promote this episode, let your friends know about it, let your colleagues know about it. We are also on LinkedIn. You can find me at Roman Trebon. You can find Kevin at Kevin Metzger. We have our Customer Success Playbook page there as well. You'll get to see clips of the show with Brian on our page. You'll get to know what upcoming guests in November. Also, leave us a subscribe, rating, and we really appreciate you listening. We'll see you next time. And as always,
keep on playing.
So tune in now and join